And good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of JMU Sound Off. It is episode 10 of season 4. The Dukes defeating the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns 24-14 in front of a sold-out crowd, clad in white inside Bridgeport Stadium to move to 5-1 on the season, 3-0 in the Sun Belt Conference. And now they are getting set for a big matchup at 3:30 p.m. inside Bridgeport Stadium against Old Dominion, the Royal Rivalry. We're going to get you set for what is a monumental contest with so many implications for the Sun Belt East. But before that, we're going to recap everything that happened in our game yesterday against the Ragin Cajuns. We're also going to do Kids Pick and then look around the Sun Belt. It was a wild weekend across the conference, so we're going to get to all of that. But we want to recognize our sponsors, Skyline Financial Partners. Remember that you can empower families for lasting financial success by learning more at SkylineFinancialPartners.com. Champions Drive Bourbon, another tailgate where we saw the bottles throughout the lots. Remember, every bottle purchase of Champions Drive goes to support student athletes and our pursuit of championships. You can find a bottle near you by visiting abc.virginia.gov or championsdr.com. Where's Woody? Remember that you can get 25% off the entire Where's Woody site for 48 hours after every episode by entering SoundOff25 in the promo code. Tons of great gear there, and the holiday season is right around the corner, so now is the time to stock up. Also want to recognize Purple Nation now with a store in Midlothian. If you're not in the Midlothian area, you can find locations in the west end of Richmond, as well as Northern Virginia and at the coast. And as always, you can find anything online at yourpurplenation.com. Want to give a shout out to Shoker Enterprises. Remember that you can impact personal, civic, and institutional productivity for success. Public philanthropy leads their mission, so we appreciate the support. The Dead Meat Society, congratulations to Barry Sonoman winning the Tailgater of the Week yesterday. An amazing spread. He had the shrimp and grits out there, some potato casserole, just an awesome spread, and that's why he was recognized, rightfully so, as the Tailgater of the Week. And remember that you can join the movement for grilling enthusiasts at deadmeatsociety.com. Outdoor Kitchen Creations, got to see some of their gear yesterday. Man, they really do have everything it takes to take your tailgating and outdoor kitchen to the next level. And you can learn more about how they can help you at backyardtrends.com. And then finally, Valley Road Vineyards. If you're going to be on I-64 between Harrisonburg and Richmond, stop by and tell them you heard about the vineyard by telling them from Sound Off, and you're going to get 50% off your wine flight. That is a mouthful. And luckily, we are done with the sponsorship announcements, and we can get right to the show. I'd like to bring on now Taylor Atkins and Michael Evangelista to the conversation. Guys, a spectacular day in Harrisonburg yesterday. The weather, sun shining bright. We got a chance to talk to President Jim before the game. Man, he was enjoying the tailgate, said he wished he could start every day like that. Another sell-out crowd inside Bridgeport Stadium to kick off the game. Just a spectacular afternoon, and that's before the football even kicked off. Kind of start with both of your kind of first thoughts from yesterday's action. The Dukes are 5-1, undefeated in Sun Belt play, and you can't overstate how important that is, especially looking forward to what's to come this week with Old Dominion coming to town.
Yeah, John, I think spectacular might be an understatement. It was a gorgeous day in the Valley. The whiteout looked phenomenal in Bridgeport Stadium. It also looked amazing on TV. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to rewatch the game that went to the game. The announcers were very complimentary on JMU. They were loud. They mentioned there was a sold-out crowd, you name it. And I'm going to spend some time here, John. I'm going to read off some stats. Yeah. And I want you to tell me, if I told you we'd only win by 10, I'd wonder if you'd believe me. Barnett, 26 for 40, 3 touchdowns. Wayne Knight, 20 carries for 111 yards. Landon Ellis, 6 catches for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns. More importantly, we have almost 500 yards of total offense, 290 in the air after 74 last week, 193 on the ground. We hold Louisiana to 288 yards of offense with 45 rushing and only 59 yards in the second half. Mm-hmm. You would think we'd blow them out, right? Like if I told you that. So at the end of the day, we'll talk more about the offense here shortly, but we found a way to win. I'll calm down the fans a little bit. This is our second team that we've played that came off a bye. So let's think about it that way. Georgia State and Louisiana, who, by the way, was favored to win the West going into the season, had 2 weeks to prepare for us. They were coming off a big 17-point comeback win versus Marshall. However, we found a way to win. I think it was more of us shooting ourselves in the foot versus them. But at the end of the day, we're 5-1, like you said.
I'm just going to echo some of Michael's points. First of all, I think the whiteout, I think sometimes we overlook that how our fan base has gotten to the point where they're educated enough and they pay attention enough to the little things, and they turn out and make an impressive whiteout where it's not like JMU's giving out a bunch of free white t-shirts to begin with. Everyone just, they knew what they had to do. They did it. So it looked great on TV. But I also want to bring up, Michael makes some good statistics about the game itself. I want to bring up a game from 4 years ago. I don't know if we all remember the Georgia State game, our first year of FBS. This is 2022, when we were down 34-14. Now, I believe if you go back and watch the sound off from that year, actually, I don't even think we were on a video platform at that point. I think we were just doing still our Twitter Spaces. But that game, we were down 34-14 at halftime, and I don't feel like anyone thought like we were going to lose that game. It sounds weird that you're down 20, but it was just like, man, we're just performing better. And so that game came to mind, and I wanted to look up the box score. Total yards, 425 to Georgia State's 257. We did have 4 turnovers to their 1s. We were -3 in turnovers, -2 in turnovers yesterday. First downs, 22-9, rushing 151-81. Time of possession was 35 minutes to their 24, yet we were down 20 points at halftime. We only won by 2 at the end of the game, but man, it just never felt like one that we were losing that game or we're going to lose that game. And that's kind of the way I felt when we were down at half yesterday. I just said, like the Michael mentioned, the statistics, the game itself, I mean, you win games by the score, but we were dominating. Our worst enemy was ourselves. We just kept shooting ourselves in the foot. So it wasn't that I felt we were getting beat. I feel like we just weren't winning. And again, I know that maybe some homerism there, but I wasn't concerned. And even going into the fourth quarter tied up, I wasn't concerned. And again, we won by 10 to a team picked to finish the West. I think Louisiana the jury's still out on how good they're going to be this year. Honestly, I went into the game thinking, well, maybe they're not that good because they had to go into overtime with a team like Marshall. But as I'm sure we'll talk later, Marshall didn't look bad yesterday. So we'll talk about that later. But that was my thoughts. I thought a great atmosphere. And I even want to real quick, the Ragin Review. I watched their post game, the podcast that Michael was on earlier this week. And the guy came on there, he was very respectful. He said the pregame, the atmosphere, the tailgating, the whiteout, everything looked great at JMU. It was really their first impression with JMU since it's the first time we played them. So I thought it was neat to hear even a rival fan base think that what they saw yesterday was impressive.
Yeah, and I just, in general, getting now to the offense, I think if you were to be in isolation to, like you said, Michael, and see the stats, I agree with you. I think you would have thought this was a blowout. But if you were limited to not being able to watch the game and just look at Twitter, which I know is not real life, I think you would have thought we would have gotten blown out. So let's go to what was obviously a nuanced offensive performance yesterday. We said in our fast thoughts, there are 2 halves of football for a reason. And I think maybe in the immediate aftermath of yesterday, I thought the first half performance by the offense was maybe worse than it really was. But agreeing with you now, looking at it on second view after watching the game on TV, it was a much more nuanced first half performance than I think I even realized in the moment. So I wanted to kind of toss it to you because I know you kind of broke down how the opening half really rolled out. Is it wasn't that we were seeing a complete lack of production on offense. We were simply not finishing drives. I was hoping you could speak to that.
Yeah, that's exactly right, John. I think not being able to finish, not being able to execute, and just, I hate to say it, just play out the play in a smart way. So I look at the first 4 drives for JMU. First drive, we go 8 plays, 52 yards before Jalen Sanchez fumbles it on that bubble screen. The next drive, we have 16 plays for 71 yards until we bring in Matthew Sluka on a 3rd and 6 near the goal line. We get 4 yards out of that play before we don't get the fourth down conversion with Jordan Fuller. I will say it on the air. I thought that was a terrible decision to switch things up, especially as we were rolling. And mind you, I think our diamond formation is probably the most productive formation in short yardage situations. I don't know why we just don't do that. And we did that in the second half. So that's drive number 2. Third drive, 3 plays, 0 yards. We punt it. Our fourth drive, 2 plays, 17 yards, which is the Barnett run, and he fumbles it. So that's what is that? That's 3 out of 4 turnovers in the start of the game. And then our 5th drive, we go 5 plays, 60 yards, and then that's when Landon Ellis wakes up and we get that touchdown there in the corner. So that's 5 drives for 200 yards that we only get 7 points out of. And I think that's where the frustration starts, because ideally when you watch the game again, the offense honestly looked like they were clicking, they were moving until maybe the end of the second quarter going to half, where I think there was some frustration going on. And I think there were, we saw Barnett maybe go into his dark place a little bit when he started airmailing like Wayne Knight there on the right side, which should have been a touchdown. But I'll say this, and I know this was probably not going to be a very popular opinion, but I thought we adjusted well to our offense. We focused on attacking the perimeter, on quick RPO, hitch plays, quick slants, quick bubble screens to get the wide receivers and the quarterbacks in rhythm. Like there's many plays that we got quick 5, 6, 9 yards. And we adjusted from last week where I think they were playing man and we were just trying to throw over the middle, but that just proved to just not be Barnett's specialty. And last week on the podcast, I was like, Barnett's really good when he's throwing to the sidelines and when he's throwing down the field. And I felt like our offense, and shout out to Dean Kennedy, he did that, right? And we were attacking the perimeter, getting some easy yardage. But I look at Brandon Wisłowski had a career day. But I look at that one time when he tried to hurdle the player. It was a 1st and 10, and it was a perfect RPO to the boundary. He gets 9 yards, but for some reason decides to jump over the guy. Like that was a 9-yard play, take the play, line up and run it again. And he almost fumbles it. It was about to be a catastrophe. That play just feels and looks like JMU offense this year where we're almost there. And then our IQ goes down to 0 in some moments versus just executing the play.
Yeah, and I do want to say, because I think your point is really spot on about how the half played out. And I think fans, including me, in the moment, probably focused singularly on a couple of plays that really highlighted and made it feel like it was worse. One in particular, which Alonzo, to his credit, owned in the post game in about as responsible and just kind of the way you want a leader to do so, saying, yeah, I missed that one. That was bad. I got to do better. But that was kind of crystallized in fans being like, yep, he's had such a terrible half. It was bad. And the way I kind of found myself now now that it's been over 24 hours from game time is say, I feel like there was a judgment cast on Alonzo's first half struggles, not his second half resilience. Because if you look at the offense that comes out after halftime and with the coaching, calling up a trick, call it a trick play, calling whatever, it was just smart play considering how Louisiana was playing downfield. They knew they could take advantage of that and they executed. And then once again, you saw the confidence and the swagger kind of come back again. And then, was it a perfect performance in the second half? No, but you could see a lot of the things that we were kind of really asking for this team to do last week, the challenges that were put out, not only by fans and shows like this, but by the staff themselves. I really felt like they could check a lot of boxes in that and has me more excited about what's coming now. And again, that's where I just am finding personally for me the reaction from the fan base not matching the reality on the ground. And I'm curious where your head's at with that, Taylor.
Before the game, I was walking around the tailgates and everyone was saying, all right, Taylor, Mr. Soundoff, what's going to happen? What are we going to do? We're going to turn this around. And I just kept saying, I said, Zoe's going to have 250 in the air and he's going to have 3 touchdowns. And everyone said, I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see it. Well, then he goes and has 290 in the air, 3 touchdowns. Should have had a 4th touchdown if he had hit that last touchdown. Was it Landon Ellis in the back corner?
It was Sanchez in the back.
Sanchez. Okay. And I feel like walking away, there were still a lot of people after the game that were like, that's not a QB performance that's going to win a Sun Belt championship. That's not an offense that's going to, hold it together. I mean, everyone that I was talking to is like, there's no way we win that game against Old Dominion next week. And I don't know, maybe it is the homer in me. I didn't see the same thing. I saw a ton of improvement from last week to this. It wasn't just in Zoe's play, although it was. I saw both in the game plan and just kind of the plays we were calling. It seemed like we were calling the plays that fit the personnel we had out there. I think the first 8 passes, I think he only missed 2 and one was a dropped pass. So I think what we keep focusing on, it's the same thing about criticism and anything. You always remember the negatives and the criticism. It's hard to remember all the times that things do go well. As someone who was a long snapper in high school, they said, you'll never know the name of the greatest long snappers of all time. You only know the name of the one time that long snapper does something wrong. And I think a lot of us right now, because we have been frustrated with how the quarterback play started the season, it all stems from that Louisville game. Because I think a lot of us are still frustrated that, with a different game plan, that was a game we could have won. We go into the Liberty game and everyone feels kind of good coming out of it because it was Zoe's first game under center. We have the Georgia Southern game. It's super wet, so it's hard to really gain anything from the passing game then. And then even myself going into the Georgia State game, I said, all right, this is a team we should beat. This is a team you see this offense come alive. This is the game to measure this team to see what they're going to be like the rest of the season. And we flopped. We flopped bad. It was one of the worst QB offensive performances I've seen, in years, and probably one of the worst we've had at the FBS level. And so to come back the way we did against this Louisiana team that I think is not going to be, I think they're going to compete for the West. You got to give credit where credit's due at the improvement that we saw. And I think the biggest takeaway for me that I would encourage anyone watching that has not seen Alonzo's post-game press conference, go watch him talk about the game, how he speaks, his football IQ, his analysis of I'm making up words now, his analysis of the plays where he admittedly messed up. That's the guy that sounded like a veteran leader, a guy that is committed to getting better and knows how to get better. And that post-game press conference really gave me a lot of optimism going into this next week against what will likely be one of our toughest opponents left on the schedule.
Well, Michael, I want you, because I know in some of our private chats, you really broke down, I thought, in a great way, what was so smart about Alonzo's post-game comments, particularly about his comfort level now with his wide receivers and tight ends, his inability in the offseason to throw as much with these and to gain that valuable chemistry that is critical for this offense to maybe perform at the levels that we saw at times last year. I don't know if any of us really gave as much weight to that, and kind of, I don't know if it's the fan base that thought he was going to come out, firing on all cylinders, where I kind of think it's really been an unfair analysis for any of us to have expected that level of performance. It's just not realistic. I'm curious where what your takeaways were from that, because I thought what you've said privately was spot on.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's not a video game, right? Like, think about it. Anytime you bring in 5 or 6 wide receivers new to the program with Sanchez, Ellis, Alston, Wisłowski, Smoke Collins, that's a big deal right off the bat. Now you add the fact that Alonzo Barnett tore his ACL, was not cleared to play or practice 100% until halfway through camp or whatever. You'd think you'd have 6 to 9 months of throwing with the receivers, throwing with the tight ends. By the way, that tight end played defensive end last year. Throwing with those guys and learning how fast they run, how do they like their breaks, how to like their ball in the out route versus the hitch versus the go. I think there's a lot to be said with the 6 to 9 months that he should have had if he were healthy, right? And I love the fact that Chesney and Barnett finally brought up. We've brought it up on this podcast before, but they brought it up. Like, the chemistry is growing. I look at the second touchdown or a third touchdown to Ellis in the back of the end zone. That is a trust throw. He had to throw that ball above 2 defenders, knowing Ellis was going to go up and get it. That takes time to develop. I look at that crossing route to Sanchez where Alonzo had to throw it above 2 defenders again. Sanchez had to go up and get it in the third quarter. That is a trust and chemistry throw that you only develop with time. And for all the folks out there that want to see QB2, QB3, QB4 out there, those quarterbacks had a year to take over the QB1 spot. And at some point, you have to give this staff some trust, the fact that they've had a year to take over that position. And Alonzo Barnett, with one leg, was still able to win that spot. That should tell you more than enough about his character and his ability to lead the team. And look how the team responds to him. Look at him after the flea flicker in the second half, and the team rallying around him, and they want him to win, and the receivers want him to win too. I'll say this, and John, I know you're saying this in the comments, but I just want to shout out this offensive line again. Yeah. I think we've given up 1 sack since Louisville, 0 sacks, and we're talking a lot about quarterbacks and receivers. We were still getting 5 to 6 to 7 yards to carry on the ground. So it's not like we need Barnett to be the second coming of Peyton Manning. Yeah. If he's having, like Taylor said, 230 yards passing and 3 touchdowns a game with no turnovers, we win the rest of our games on that alone.
Yeah, that one. I was saying, that 1 sack over 4 games is it puts us in 38th in the country for fewest sacks allowed. And again, a lot of that is skewed towards that Louisville game, but we're giving up just over 1 sack a game. But again, statistically, it goes back to the Louisville game. The offensive line deserves all the credit in the world. And obviously for the casual fan, that's a position that not a lot of people look at and analyze.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, on that sack, go back to the post-game press conference as well. Without even being prompted, Alonso goes, yeah, and that one sack, that was on me. I got to do better. So he is looking for ways to show his leadership and to take personal accountability. And again, we're not saying it was a perfect performance. It wasn't. Alonso, if he was a guest on the show right now, he's in the fourth box. He's not only not saying it's perfect, he's talking consistently about what do we need to progress? What do we need to do to find the gear that this unit wants to hit because they know what's capable from it. But I just want to say to the online agitators who exist, and not just in our fan base, they exist across sports kind of social media, is that they lean into the moments when they know the online chatter class want blood. They want kind of rage content. And I do think that small minority of accounts help to fuel this. But those small minority of accounts are the ones that are consistently propping up quarterbacks that are on this roster who we've never even seen play. And those same accounts would take no accountability if they did make a quarterback change and this 5-1 team went to 5-2, and that second quarterback that they pull in doesn't have the game that they want. So that's why it's like, I try not to get lost in that, but it is hard not to see such a small portion of the online chatter class just kind of churning this, and it's almost like they're rooting in some ways for this failure. And I just say we're 5-1 with this offensive unit that is continuing to find ways to improve. And yes, they have to take accountability for the mistakes that they've made, but we have got to get past this like reflexive nature of, and I know it's broader than just JMU's, of it's always the backup quarterback, because you're not taking into account the dropped passes or routes that are not run, or what the other team is doing. To Michael's point, this was a Louisiana defense that had a week to prepare for us, and I don't think that is a point that is gaining enough credit in terms of what kind of impact that can really have.
Well, and I think, you go back to some of Coach Withers' teams where the defense was not great, but we just outscored everybody, so there's part of me that's like, whether we're winning games 24-14, 14-7, would it be any different or better if we were winning games 54-48, 48-42? I mean, at the end of the day, this offense, you won't find anyone on this podcast defending this offense as being top tier 1 championship caliber. You also won't find, I think, anyone on the coaching staff or the team saying, oh no, our offense is one of the best. They know what they've done on the field. But again, in these post-game pressers and these interviews, I continue to see a team that knows how to address those issues. So I guess I maybe have too much optimism, but I have a lot of confidence that we're going to continue to see improvement throughout the year. And while that offense is still improving, still gelling, still a bunch of guys who have not played with each other that very long, we have this defense that is just playing lights out. And I think you even heard Alonso mention that in his post game, where he's like, look, we see the areas we need to improve upon, and we understand that we need to do that. And he's like, and I'm so thankful that we have this defense that we can always count on. It's continue to be consistent. And once again, I know we're going to get into them, but they continue to put up a performance that allows this offense to do what it needs to do to get better. And at the end of the day, you mentioned we're 5-1. We are only 2 to 3 games into conference play for every team in the Sun Belt. There is not another Sun Belt team on our schedule the rest of the year that hasn't already lost a game in conference, just 2 to 3 games in. There's not another team in the Sun Belt that has less than 2 losses. So for me, it's like this whole conference is just beating up on itself. And we've been fortunate to come out on the other side, despite our mistakes, despite shooting ourselves in the foot, the turnovers, the missed passes, the misreads. We're 5-1 right now, and 6 games into the season. I'd like to find someone that preseason that said, oh, 5-1 is our floor 6 games into the season right now.
I'll add to that point there, Taylor, because we're 6 games in. I think it's starting to be more of the haves and have-nots, who can actually do this and who can't. And I say this because I don't think he was on the injury report, but there was a lot of noise around Isaiah Alston coming in. I don't think he played on Saturday. Yeah. We saw a lot of plays to Brandon Wisłowski. We saw Jalen Sanchez in that slot position a couple games. I think Wisłowski was able to really step up and show what he can do in that position. And also, we've made Landon Ellis wide receiver 1. Maybe he wasn't that way 2 or 3 weeks ago, but they're starting to really fortify who are our guys, who are the dudes that can get things done. Lakota Dupree taking over the tight end 1 position, whether either blocking or catching some passes down the middle. He is the guy there in that position, and people are comfortable in those roles. At the end of the day, it's an outcome sport. And I think people are settling in. We're finding very quickly who are the haves and have-nots. And I think we need to, right? Because we can't keep this idea of like, let's see how people react. I think Chesney talks about who reacts in fire, who's tested in fire. I think we've seen that, and people have risen above. That being said, we just have to execute. You take the fumbles away. You take that jump when he kind of jumped over the defender and fumbled the ball. Take that stuff out of the way and just clean up the little details. This is a dynamic offense that's probably above average, maybe top half of the league, which is about all we really need. And on the last point here before we maybe move on is on the flags, you could tell the refs were very ticky-tacky on Saturday. And I'm not going to defend it. There are things that we shouldn't have done. You got to let go at some times. But that first flag when Wisłowski caught the ball, broke like 3 tackles and went down the field 30 yards, and they called a block in the back on Jordan Fuller. I dare everyone to watch that play. He was running stride for stride with the defender and put his arm out for like a second to like touch the defender, and they called a block in the back. And it just kept going. And I'm like, and you could hear Coach Chesney in the post presser. He was a little fired up. He was like, I don't want to talk about flags anymore. Watch the game, look at the flags, build your own opinion. I am done. There's some things we need to clean up, but we also have to know if the refs are going to call a close game, we've got to adjust to it as well.
Yeah, I had something for penalties later, but since it got brought up, 10 penalties again. I love the way Coach Chesney addressed it in the post game, because he's right. Now I think that was the most professional and best way you can say it, because
that's
for
what
me,
I can find.
this was the most, in my opinion, egregious refereeing that I'd seen since the Louisville game. And my gosh, I can't go back to that Louisville game. I can't tell you how many times Louisiana is running up to the line, and I'm like, isn't that a defensive delay of game? Because it was 4 weeks ago in Louisville. But some of the calls, especially those 2 pass interference calls at the end of the game on that last drive for Louis. I mean, it was egregious. It was terrible. It's some of the worst that I've seen all year. Having said that, once again, it's 10. We had 10 penalties. Once again, I think right now, what did I write down? That I believe we're 3rd or 4th in the country in most penalties per game. So that the question is whether it's the ref's fault, whether it's us. It was 102 yards of penalties yesterday. That is something that I'd love to see get cleaned up, because as bad as the refereeing was, and it was bad, when you're one of the worst teams in the country, you just got to find a way of how to address that and get better there. So I think that's an aspect that I would love to see improve in the second half of the season.
My last comment on offense, though, what I'd love to see, and you kind of made reference to it, though, was in the post-game press conference when Landon Ellis says, we want to perform for this defense. Like they are the offensive unit is so appreciative and so aware of what they're doing for them. And they that is fueling their work, their desire to improve this group. And I think that just shows that you've seen in some teams, I think even in JMU history, where that disparity and that gap between offense and defense is so extensive. And then you see the body language when they come to the sidelines, and the defense is like, what do we got to do to, defense says, what do we got to do to they can't help us at all. At least from the outside perspective and what we see, that gap is not there. You have an offensive unit that is just grateful and appreciative and has such a strong desire to improve, and a defensive unit that just takes it constantly as like, this is the challenge in front of us, and we're going to not only going to meet it, we're going to blow right through it. And just as a tale of 2 halves was for the first half versus defense and offense, we saw a first half defensive performance yesterday that was not perfect. Let's be honest. There were some things to like in that, but there were some moments where Louisiana was able to get some big plays through the air, and obviously is what gave them the lead early in the game. Michael, what did you see in the first half from our defensive unit? And then we can transition right to what went right in the second half, because it was impressive to see.
Yeah, no doubt. I think for context for the fans listening, Louisiana rolled out their 3rd-string quarterback, Lunch Winfield, who's a dynamic as they come. I think he's like an all-state Louisiana player, dynamic with his feet. You saw him. He's got a live arm. He was able to bring them back against Marshall a couple of weeks ago. I think he solidified himself as the quarterback. We had to force him to make plays. And I'll give props where props due. He made some plays in the first half. I'll give him that. But you look at what this defense did, and I always compare and contrast it to the 2023 defense, where we are forcing opposing quarterbacks to make the tough throw. They have to make the right read or else something bad happens. And we got big played in the first half. And there was that one play. The first touchdown, number one, should have ended with that interception to Culp. I think that whole drive was predicated by them being able to acquire flags and going down the field before we gave up that touchdown. And then the second one, I mean, we were in a zero coverage, man-to-man outside. We had a free rusher. I think Gobira was about to get a sack. And I got to give it a lunch. He stepped up in the pocket, threw that slant to the receiver. DJ looked like he slipped on that play, and he ran for a touchdown. Those were the two scoring plays for Louisiana. Now in the second half, you just got to give Coach Hitchler and his staff so many props, because we always say it. It always starts up front, and that defensive line, even in the first half, absolutely dominated the Louisiana offensive line. And they tried to run lunch in some +1 situations. And I'll give a name that we have not talked about in this podcast that has been sneaky good and finally deserves some more flowers after yesterday. Terry Lockett. Remember him? He came in from Syracuse. He's been our starter right next to Manny Bush at majority of these games, and he hasn't moved. And he's just been solid right there in the middle. I think he's a little bit of I think he lines up in front of the guard. He had that fantastic play, I think, in the second half on 4th and 2, or it was a 3rd and 2, where they ran the quarterback, and he was so quick. He got in front of the face, got a tackle for loss. He's a player, I think, he's gotten so much better. He came in with an injured shoulder and has just improved week over week. But, man, that front seven was just able to control everything. I mean, Trent Hendrick, we probably didn't think about it at the start of the year. He looks like an NFL guy at this point. Yeah. And Jacob Thomas, like, when is he not making plays? And he is just all over the field. I love that they let him up front. They let him all over the field, but he just brings such a good swagger. And again, yeah, we give up 14 points, which is a bummer. Should have been 0. But I think I saw the stat that we were the first Sun Belt team in history to hold their first 6 opponents under 300 yards as a program. And we have the most sacks in the FBS since 2022. Second most sacks with 141, only behind Penn State. So I think that's more historical value, but it just shows you this defense is special. And if the offense can get us first downs and just get us some consistent points, I mean, it's if we can get to 17, I don't think anyone could beat us. And we have playmakers and elite playmakers at all 3 levels of the game. And last shout out here, Manny Bush. He absolutely was a wrecking ball inside. And I talked about it. Shout out to the Ragin Review guys. I really enjoyed my podcast with them. But I mentioned Manny Bush. It all starts with him because he eats up 2 to 3 gaps, and you can't move him, which allows the Gannon Weathersbys, the Trent Hendricks, the Spinagattis, and all these guys to blitz and be open and make plays and just run and get to the ball. It's really fun to see. And as someone that loves defense, it's like probably the most favorite part of the game.
I just want to say on defense, it's often said that defenses take on the complexion of their coaches. And yesterday, I thought it was one of my favorite moments of the whole experience of being inside Bridgeforth, especially where we sit in section 109, being right behind the defensive bench. We got a bird's eye view to Coach Hissler's coaching style. We saw it last week at Georgia State, and just how animated and how intense he was on that sideline yesterday. And I thought it all came to a head on one play. It's the end of the half. Louisiana has a chance to go up by 2 scores going into halftime. It could very well have been a very different outcome to yesterday's game if they're able to punch that in the end zone. We can debate, should they have kicked the field goal? Should they have went for it? But hey, they said, you know what? We're going to go for the win. We're going to go for the jugular here. And our defense steps up in a way that is just one of those moments that wherever this season ends, for me, I kind of take notes about plays in the season that I'm going to circle. That, for me, set the tone for everything that happened in the second half and was the momentum lift that made you feel like, all right, you know what? We're going to be okay. To Taylor's point, I never lost faith. I never lost confidence in this group. And it was that play that I think had me leaving for the concession stand saying, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, there were times, maybe it's easy to say this because we won, but there were times last year and those, the App State games, the Marshall games, where I did have this uneasy feeling, even though we were up maybe at half, that I was like, I just don't know. Yesterday, there was something about just the way we were playing. We already hit it on early in the show where it just didn't seem like we were being dominated. And I couldn't imagine that we continued to shoot ourselves in the foot the way we did again and again. So I just felt like we were going to come out of this game ahead, regardless of what had happened in the first half. But, our defense, once again, updated national rankings, third in the country in rush defense, just behind Texas Tech and Mizzou, fourth in the country in overall defense behind Toledo, Mizzou, and Oklahoma. There is a four-way tie, though, with us, Ohio State. Can anyone guess what the third? I'm sorry, there's a three-way tie. Us, Ohio State, and there's a third team. Can anyone guess? The fighting Kurt Signettis out there in Indiana.
I knew it.
And then our pass defense is 13th in the country right now. I do want to point out, because a couple of things, our friend John Butler, who's been on the show before, we were talking a little bit this morning. The way we play our defense, the aggressiveness, I think it is prone to give up some big plays, but 99% of the time, those big plays aren't given up. So yesterday, you had those passes of 44 yards and 69 yards. I think there was a lot of aggressiveness in the secondary for why that caused that. But that's 110 yards of their total yardage right there. Obviously, we don't want to revisit the Louisville game, but there was 140 yards right there on two plays. We had a big play, that 52-yarder against Georgia State last week. Georgia Southern had a big 43-yard pass. So these big plays are accounting for a large chunk of the offensive yardage that our defense is giving up. And when the defensive yardage is being so low, I think it makes it even more impressive that it's just one or two plays that's consisting of the majority of this low total yardage. And I think I'm willing to allow for some of those big plays, and they're usually the plays that either result in scores or leading to a score. But I'm willing to give that up if it means that the rest of the game and the way the defense is playing is just lights out. I think even the Ragin Review guys pointed out that they only averaged 1.5 yards per carry yesterday, and again we held a team to under 50 yards of rushing. I believe they only had 45 yards of rushing yesterday. So again, it's the same. It's a different weekend, but it's the same story. The defense is playing lights out and continue to allow this team to be one of the best teams in the Sun Belt.
Well, and we're just hit on the head there. Well, just to say, we're just making teams one-dimensional, and that to me has been incredibly impressive. But Michael, your point.
Yeah, I was gonna just add to Taylor. I think you just shared like our defensive philosophy, right? I go back to the 2023 team where it was go big or go home. We just couldn't cover anybody. That's why everyone threw for 500 yards against us, but we led the nation in sacks. This is a downhill attacking defense that's going to force quarterbacks to make quick decisions. It's going to force running backs to pick their holes very fast because our guys flow to the ball. And that's what you love about it. Coach Hitchler has just given such I call it, he pisses oil and vinegar to this team, right? He has such an influential, and to John's point, the team takes up his attitude and the way we attack. And I'm going to talk about this too. Our defense, I feel like, gains confidence every week. And we've talked about it ad nauseum. Eric O'Neal goes on, Kyrie Mans goes on. We have unproven talent at defensive end. But for Sahir West to have another sack today, for Aiden Gobira to have another sack yesterday as well, that's confidence building. And that's like you start having the belief that you can make the play, you can get the quarterback, you can make the key tackle in certain situations. That just grows. And guys like Amar Thomas, that just keeps having more confidence. And if you watch our defense, we drop our defensive ends back in coverage and we bring them. It's relatively exotic. I think it might be simple when you really look at it, which is what I kind of like about this defense. It's downhill, keep everyone in front of you, and let your athletes go. It kind of reminds me when we had Bob Trott and I think Coach Heatherman, very similar. Where last year I felt like we kind of had to out-scheme teams to really get in there, and we just didn't allow our guys to run. And maybe just we didn't have the personnel at the time. But the fact that we can play 10, 11, 12 guys on the defensive line and rotate people even on the back end and just play coverage and let your best athletes be the best athletes, it's really so much fun to watch. And we gave up, 59 yards and 3 first downs in the second half. While last year we were a first half team, I'd rather be what we are right now, which is we are elite in terms of second half adjustments.
And that was to talk about second half adjustments, if there was a question going into this season that we brought up on our preview show and many of the other podcasts and media said was, how were we going to perform in second halves? Because it's almost like we've completely flipped the script. But that shows that our staff continues to learn, that our staff has, self-reflection and everything else to take their own accountability, has learned how to change whatever it is in our system or process at halftime. To now, I've kind of looked at this defense. It's almost like a volcano that the pressure kind of builds as you get into the second half, and then it just explodes. There's no play that I think is more emblematic of that than the interception that Jacob Thomas has at the end. They were building. Yes, there were some moments where you're like, Louisiana was gaining some confidence as they went down the field, but there's just the swagger is so obvious. Just a naked eye looking at it, like their body language, the way that they're carrying themselves on the field, and then they just always find a way to make that play. And then they look at each other and go like, "Yeah, it's just what we do." And I think that's the type of thing that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy over time. Is that when you think you're going to be great, a lot of times you just are, and that's what they do. And that is a product of, I believe, a coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. That accountability just feels instant in that group. They're not okay with one touchdown given up. Sometimes we gave it up. We were put in a bad spot. It's all Coach Hitch being like, you know what? That's not acceptable. This is what our standard is, our standard, regardless of the situations we're put in. And I think that's the type of thing that bleeds through everyone, and that's on that unit. That bleeds through the scout team, because I thought that was also interesting. That was mentioned in the post-game press conference a couple of times. It was how well the scout team is doing in terms of showing looks and giving this group an opportunity to be so prepared. And it's just been impressive to see. And it's something where I continue to find, like, as good as we've been, I don't even know if we're even close to reaching what our potential is, because I just feel like this group has such a high standard for themselves that their only trajectory is going to be continue to go up. But it's to say from my perspective now what comes next. Obviously, we're about to face an opponent in ODU that's going to present a whole another set of different challenges. I did want to ask you, Michael, the one last thing about lunch is going into this game. I know there were some people saying, is this the type of game that served as a good primer for what ODU is going to show us next week with an athletic quarterback I know our show we talked about, we were concerned about the quarterback run this week. Did you see anything from the defense that makes you more confident about our ability to stop ODU next week? I'm curious where, or if this is just two totally different teams with totally different philosophies, and there's not much you can glean from it.
I would say it's probably the latter. I mean, when you look at what Louisiana did, it looked more like Liberty in terms of how they ran their offense with their quarterback, less Old Dominion. Old Dominion will be totally different, and we'll talk about it here in a second. Everything Old Dominion does offensively and defensively will be probably the only version of that we'll ever see. We don't see the 3-3-5 a lot on defense, so that's going to be a brand new look for offense to adjust to. We don't see this sort of veer and shoot offense all the time that the Tennessees of the world run, where you've got receivers spread out wide. You have the O-line super tight up front that creates these massive gaps. So we've got to adjust, and we got to be able to tackle in space. But what I like to see, and this is probably the most boring response, John, our ability to dominate the line of scrimmage and stop the first and the second options, which is typically the quarterback run or the running back up the middle, that forced the quarterback to then make solid decisions. And when you look at what Marshall did, they forced, Colton Joseph to 4 turnovers. That's a blueprint, right? We need to follow. And a lot of that is, how can we make Gobiras, the Sahir West, the Andrew Tadeos, the Manny Bushes, the Iziaguas as productive as possible up front? That's going to be the key to next week.
Awesome. Well, guys, another elite defensive performance has us poised again. We're 5-1, undefeated in Sun Belt play. I think this group is going to continue to hear the noise online. They're going to rise to the moment because they understand what's at stake in this game, and that's what I'm so excited about. Is we have the potential with this unit to continue to put us in the conversation for not only a Sun Belt championship, but everything else that comes after that. Because as we've seen across college football, again, I don't think any of us know what's going to happen week to week in this new landscape. I don't think a lot of people probably had Indiana doing what they did to Oregon this week. I don't think anyone in the prognosticators that are out there had Marshall beating ODU. I think that that applies now to all of these conferences, all of these games. Just keep winning, keep finding ways to put another W in the win column, and we'll see where everything kind of shifts out. We did want to transition to have a little bit of fun before we get to our ODU preview. We had a little bit of fun after the game yesterday. We're some kids in the tailgate lot. Want to give a shout out to them for giving us their kids say the darndest things, kind of hot takes to what they saw in the stands, and based off what we've said in the first half of this podcast, I think they're pretty spot on. So shout out to all the kids out there who are fans of JMU football. We love your passion. You're the fans of the future for this group, and it's great to see. And Taylor, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for this week's version of Kids Picks. It does not, unfortunately, include Afton. But
Afton's been a little off the last couple of weeks with his Kids Picks. We needed to bring in the experts that were real kids. So we've brought back Owen Rowe once again to the show. You may remember Owen from a few weeks ago, made some Clemson picks and also made a JMU Liberty pick. And we've also brought back my son, James Adkins. And so James and Owen, you might remember them. If you saw them yesterday, like John said, they were on the post-game Kid Pick feedback. So first, I want to turn it over to Owen because I asked both boys to pick a game other than JMU Old Dominion next week, to pick another game to kind of give their feedback on. And so we're going to go with those games first. So, Owen, what other game other than JMU Old Dominion next week did you want to talk about on today's Kid Picks?
Clemson and SMU.
All right. Now, I know that you are a Clemson fan, so give me your thoughts. What do you think the results of the Clemson-SMU game will be next week?
Clemson is definitely going to win.
Okay. Do you have a score prediction?
40-30 Clemson.
Wow. Now, Owen, you and I talked a little bit about this before the show. SMU does have Ymir Knight on their team playing wide receiver. He is the brother of JMU's running back, Wayne Knight. But you don't think? Do you think Ymir might beat the Clemson Tigers this weekend, or still no? Still no. All right. Now, James, you picked East Carolina versus Tulsa. Now, East Carolina in the American Conference had a very close game this week against Tulane. I think they gave them a great game. Now, tell us, why did you pick East Carolina this week? What's the connection to you?
My grandparents went there, and you just got to cheer for purple.
You just got to cheer for purple. I love that. So you're picking East Carolina over Tulane. Now, over Tulsa. It is a 16.5-point spread as ECU is the big favorites going to that game. Do you think East Carolina is going to win by more than 16.5 points?
Yes.
Boom. You heard it here first. Not professional betting advice, but James says to take the Pirates and the points. All right. Now,
I don't have to worry with that.
Now, the big game coming up next week on national television, James Madison University versus the Old Dominion Monarchs. Old Dominion had a big win earlier this year against Virginia Tech. Everyone thought they were
got fired.
And the coach got fired. And we thought that Old Dominion would be undefeated coming into this game. But yesterday they had a little hiccup against a team in West Virginia. Marshall took it to them. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But Owen, who do you have winning this week between JMU and Old Dominion?
JMU.
And can you give me a score for this week's game?
50-20.
50-20. All right. You think that the JMU offense is gonna put up some fireworks, and 20 points would be a lot to be scored on the JMU defense. But I think if we have that many offensive fireworks, we may give them an extra possession or two. All right, James, I'm going to come to you now. JMU, Old Dominion, who's going to win next week?
JMU.
And James, do you have a score prediction for the game next week?
3-60.
3-60. Now, actually, I think that's a little bit more like it. I think Old Dominion only getting 3 points in our defense is more about what our defense can do. And I like the 60-point prediction. All right, so James and Owen have big expectations for the JMU offense next week. And, guys, I want to thank you once again for coming on another edition of the JMU Sound Off Kid Picks. Thank you very much.
Man.
Oh, wait, actually, one thing.
Yeah.
You both were at the game yesterday. Did you want to talk about what's your favorite part of the game yesterday? Oh, and I'll let you go first.
Okay. So there was a big streamer on the bleachers,
Uh-huh.
and it was right next to a stranger. and then a person at the game sitting with us, he told me to go grab it, so I grabbed it.
And did you throw it?
Yeah, I threw it.
And you guys were in the upper deck, so it went all the way down.
Did you see it?
I probably did at some point. James, what was your favorite part about the game yesterday? You had some different color hair yesterday, didn't you?
Purple hair.
Purple hair. So what was your favorite thing from yesterday?
It was probably the game. I just liked it.
You like it. You like when JMU wins.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you guys coming on the show. Thanks again for giving your kid picks, and I'm looking forward to 50 or 60 points being scored next weekend against Old Dominion.
Man, plug those kids into whatever the internet needs to feel more confidence in this offense. They haven't lost confidence. I love that. That's what we need. We need that positive energy. This is a big week. There are certain games that you just schedule every year before the season even started, before we knew where we were going to be, that we said, you got to make sure you're not going to miss the games against the apps of the world. And ODU is one of them now. I think going into, as you said, into this week, we all expected to be 5-1, everything on the table. This is still a very, very dangerous Old Dominion team that's probably going to be coming into Harrisonburg pretty pissed off. Let's just be honest, after what happened yesterday in Huntington, West Virginia. And how do I know it's such a big game? Because when I talked to President Jim yesterday, I didn't have to prompt him. He knew exactly what was at stake. And had his message. Go check it out on our Instagram or YouTube feed. He delivered a message to fans. And then immediately after the game, in his car with his kids, with Mallory Roan, athletic director Matt Roan sets the stage, saying not only get into the tailgate lots at 8 a.m. to fuel up, he wants everyone juiced. So Champions Drive for everyone. Remember, abc.virginia.gov, championsdr.com. Matt Roan endorsed. But then also the message to fans, get inside the stadium. Students get in. Let's create a hostile environment, even in warmups, and then stay the full 60. If there's anything yesterday that we can point to say, we got to do better, it's a one-score game at halftime. A lot of people went to the exits. We're not going to dwell on it so much because, let's be candid, we're not going to be able to solve it in a simple conversation. But the stage and the stakes are so big this weekend. Kind of initial thoughts on this matchup. I'll start with you, Michael, because this is a monster one.
Yeah, but before we go into that, I mean, just going back to Saturday, maybe I'm giving the fan base a little bit too much here, but I remember beforehand, obviously it's a noon kickoff. It's a fast tailgate. It was a bit of a sleepy environment at first. And I think, as I talked to just random people, they were asking, wasn't this the Lafayette team? Like, what is a Louisiana? Like, are they in our conference? And I get it. We've never played them before. There was no history. And I think we felt that. I think the crowd was trying to, it's been a while since we've been back in Bridgeforth, but there's no excuse this weekend. This is Old Dominion. This was the team, when I was in school that embarrassed us, both home and away, and we have to show out. And I look back in 2023, I think we set an attendance record at the night game a couple of years ago, with 26,700 or so. We have that opportunity as well. But to go into this, and John, do you have some breaking news for us?
I was just saying right now, as we're recording, Penn State just fired James Franklin.
Wow. Look at that. Taylor, are your friends in Southwest Virginia happy, or is that an opportunity maybe?
Yeah, I have a lot of things to say about that. That surprises me a bit. And to be honest, if I'm Virginia Tech, that's just one more. That's $1 million
buyout. Oof.
Yeah, but that's one more. That's one more big fish in the pool that's now looking for a coach. And you have a lot of big name programs out there looking for coaches. It doesn't make things easier for our friends down here in Southwest Virginia.
So breaking news, totally derailing our ODU preview, but I know that prevailing wisdom online is that they make a phone call to a native son of Pennsylvania, and Curtis Signetti.
I was going to say, I was wondering where you're going with that. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. But I will tell everyone, my dream job is still to get fired as a head coach in Division I program, because $56 million for doing a bad job, that's not bad.
Pretty spectacular way to live.
That.
Yeah. And you got very choosy about what comes next too. So
100%.
I want to go back.
Last thing, some Penn State players though, real quick. Do
They-
we see some portal movement? A lot of Pennsylvania kids love to play in Harrisburg. So I'm a shout out. There's a certain tight end at Penn State who's a freshman. I'd certainly love to see make his way back to Virginia.
That's a good point. That's
Yeah.
a good point. Let's go
You
back
were
to ODU. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, Taylor.
Well, you're talking about the game and the atmosphere. It wasn't just, we saw the second half exodus once again. And I kind of took to Twitter and made the point, the weather was perfect. There's plenty of time to party that Saturday night. I mean, it's an early afternoon game. The game was competitive. I was going back and forth with someone on Twitter, and they said, well, the team was down. They weren't giving them a product to see. And I said, well, the other half the time we're doing too good, and it's a boring game to watch. And so and I think the person wrote back and said something about, well, like, look, this is this happened. This is just college students these days. And I said, look, I can't agree more. This is not unique to JMU by any means. At the Virginia Tech game last week, they were in the game down only 3 to Wake Forest competitively. Their student section left. It was homecoming. So I get it. The average college student these days, I understand, is just not going to stick around for 4 quarters of football. Having said that, that's the average. And I'd like to think that JMU is not trying to attain to be the average program. I think that when we talk about how fast the football tickets go and how quickly JMU students fill up that section, and John, I think you pointed out too, it wasn't just the student section. And we looked in the corners of the 400 level and half the seats were empty. I think it's just a thing where in this day and age of instant gratification and a fast-paced social media world, it is hard to keep everyone's attention for 3 or 4 hours. But having said that, we've got to be better than the average. Our fan base has got to show that we need an expanded stadium, not just for the seats that are there at kickoff, but for those that are sticking around the whole time. And we have a game this weekend against Old Dominion, which, you can't afford to have a half-empty stadium when that game is probably coming down to a line. I think we looked the last 2 years, this Old Dominion game has been close. And both these last 2 years, it was when the teams were kind of like there was clearly a better team than the other, and it was still a close game. So I don't really care whether they lost to Marshall or not. I did look at the box score. It was, the offensive stats were pretty much even for both Marshall and Old Dominion. I think they both had 400 plus yards of offense. It was just Old Dominion shot themselves in the foot with 5 turnovers to Marshall's 0. And so I think, what's the old adage that statistically, a turnover is worth about 4 points. Well, you lose by 24, you had 5 turnovers. That Marshall Old Dominion game was a lot closer than the score probably realized. And I just don't see Old Dominion, as good as our defense is, I don't see them coming into Bridgeport and making, 5 turnovers or being -5 in the turnovers to JMU. So next week is going to be a monumental game. It's going to be one of the biggest home games that we've probably ever had. It's going to be on national TV again, which I wanted to point that out. I think Kevin Warner mentioned something last week about either last week's game was either the Louisiana game was the 24th nationally televised game we've had since moving to FBS, or the Old Dominion game is the 24th. Either way, that's 24, 25 nationally televised games in FBS. I actually went back and did a deep dive of games on our schedule over the last 20 years. I could only find 27 games in that 20-year period that were nationally televised. I was even fairly flexible and liberal with that interpretation of national televised because I was including some of our games that were on NBC Sports while it was a short-lived channel. And of those 27 games, I believe 17 of them were quarterfinal, semifinal, championship post game. So when for the regular season, I could only find 9. And again, a lot of those were either NBC Sports or that rare time where we're playing an FBS school on ESPNU, like when JMU played NC State. So to see the visibility that JMU has played or has been able to showcase in this first 4 years of FBS, the national branding that's given to the university. I think I saw JMU Admissions point out something last week about just what this game on Louisiana and ESPN2 meant. We've come a long way in a very short period of time. And I'd be curious to see with Old Dominion's loss, you see those statistics of the percentage of what team has the best shot at the CFP. You got to think that JMU inched up a few spaces with Old Dominion's loss, and we have a big opportunity this weekend to not only put ourselves in a good position for the Sun Belt Championship game, but to continue ourselves in the running for that CFP spot.
Well, I do want to comment on that because I actually had a chance to talk to Matt Rome before the game, and he mentioned that as being another thing that people may not be thinking about if we are able to pull the win on Saturday against ODU is that now you start to get on every single one of those graphics that's on the Fox Sports shows and the ESPN shows and every podcast in the country that's doing their own deep dive and breakdown of who's likely to be in the college football playoff. And that's just additional impressions. That's every recruit in the country who you're talking to is going like, wow, I have a shot if I'm being talked to by JMU about being in that conversation for the college football playoff. And again, just continues to elevate this program among the blue bloods in college football because you're going to be one of 20 teams on those graphics. And you think of the schools in this state and schools around the country who all of us growing up thought were the untouchable blue bloods. They're not going to be on those graphics. The Penn States of the world, believe it or not, this year, not going to be on those graphics. You have potential to put a Duke dog on that, and that's pretty exciting.
And I think we've become so used these first 3 years to being in one of those top 5 spots in the G5. I think for most of this season, depending on what ranking system you're looking at, whether it's ESPN or Massey or Sagarin or what have you, I think we're kind of hanging in that 7-8 spot among the G5 teams. And a lot of our fan base is pissed. I mean, a lot of our fan base doesn't think that that's good enough for JMU. So I do like that we have this level of, because I don't think it's elitism. I think it's just an expectation level at JMU that you always are striving to be the best in whatever you are. And I like that the fact that when you're not even in that top 5 spot, that is a bit of a letdown at JMU. But having said that, I think it is also a good idea to put some context and some realism to this, that we're in year 4 of FBS. There hasn't been a year where we haven't gotten votes in a top 25 poll. There hasn't been a year where we've really been outside of that top 10 in the G5. There hasn't been a year where we haven't been a conference championship caliber team, or at least in the eyes of the media and stuff. So I'm rambling at this point. I just think the level that we've reached in such a short time, we've kind of put ourselves in a position where it is the best or nothing at all.
Yeah.
Well, I think number one, going back to the fans, Bridgeforth looks amazing on TV, and it looks amazing when everyone is there. When we saw the white pom-poms and the streamers, shout out to ESPN. They did a great job showcasing the Valley. I think we need to lean into this. If you're a student or if you're a ticket holder listening to this, bring your friends this weekend, because we should probably lean into the whole student section, Liv Moss, ESPN competition that they have going on, where they talk about the top student sections every week. And they showed the student section in the first half, and they were talking about how ruckus it was, how crazy and how passionate this fan base is. We've got an opportunity to do that again, because we have to. And let's get into ODU a little bit. I mean, this is, I think statistically, I don't know if this is real, if this is up to date or not. I think they have a top 15 offense in the country. They're number 7 in the rushing yards on offense with 251 yards per game. And we talk about it. If you play defense and you run the ball, you're going to win a lot of games. And it all starts with this quarterback, Colton Joseph. And I think he's in year 3 in the program, which is why it's more imperative that we have a packed Bridgeport Stadium to make it as loud as humanly possible, because it affected Louisiana. And let's just say we didn't have all 25,000 people there. Imagine if we did. And we talk about having bad losses. You look at, yes, the Marshall loss was really bad, but then ODU lost to Indiana. I forgot the exact score. I think they lost by like 10 points. Colton Joseph ran 10 times for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's the trigger man, and we've got to stop him. We've got to make it really hard for him. They run, I wouldn't say gimmicky, because everyone runs a version of this, but they run a very difficult and complex offense on paper when you look at it, that we have to be on we have to be on our A game on defense for us to really handle them, because they're going to take advantage of a ton of space. That being said, they averaged 38 points a game. We all know they blew the wheels off of Virginia Tech earlier this year. Colton Joseph looked like Michael Vick that game. He had 16 for 22 for 276 yards and 2 touchdowns and ran all over him. I will say there is a weakness with this team. They give up 165 yards rushing per game, which I think is 103rd in the nation. And Taylor, maybe you could check me on this. I think Georgia State was one of the worst on rushing defenses. Louisiana was also one of the worst in rushing defenses. Liberty as well. So we've played some pretty poor rushing defenses, see what we can do to them. I think that's a place where hopefully we can take advantage of going into next week. And for the fans, this means more, right? I know you work with some ODU people. Your neighbors might have gone to ODU. Your neighbors probably, graduate the same time as you. And remember when they beat us twice in 2010 and 2011. And Taylor Heineke went to the NFL and made them millions of dollars, and they moved up to Conference USA and left us behind. Like your neighbor's friend or your family friend went to ODU, or you're like our buddy Taylor, who's secretly an ODU fan on the podcast and went to ODU basketball games and likes to root for them every now and then. This is a game that matters. And this is time for our fan base to kind of put money where their mouth is and show up and be loud and make it as hostile as possible.
Yeah, so just to Michael was correct. I just looked it up. Old Dominion is 106 in the country in their rush defense. We have a great opportunity to capitalize on that there. What's also great about this year, especially in a year where we play both Liberty and Old Dominion, is in the transfer portal area, high school recruits. You know, there's 3 G5 programs in this state, and not every year do we get to play both of them. And so we've already dominated Liberty right now. I think the outlook for their program going forward, at least next year or two, is not much is going to change there. We have an opportunity to beat Old Dominion and win one aspect of that recruiting battle between Liberty and Old Dominion, which is taking care of the competition on the field. This game has, in-state just means more. And when we put in this is the first rivalry game of the season for me, in my opinion. I'll leave it at that. So
no, this is the game in the Commonwealth. Yeah. This for so many different reasons, has so many different implications, and I don't think it's impossible to overstate what it means for programs when we're all talking to the same players, we're all talking to the same recruits. This just matters more. I did want to ask you, Michael, if there's one thing that I am intrigued about, is our ability to control the time of possession has been such an underrated factor in our success this season. How do you factor or see that factoring into this game against ODU? Is that we're going to obviously want to keep their offense on the sideline as much as possible. That's the best way to success. But do you see so maybe touch on that first, but then is there a player on this defense that you think is key to success on Saturday, or is it a full unit? Who are you going to be watching when our unit takes the field on Saturday, particularly in trying to control Colton Joseph?
Yeah, it all starts up front. We talked about that earlier, but I think for all the positive things we have to say about this defensive backfield, I think we'll really see how elite they are. Because when it comes to this offense that we're playing, tackling in space, making sure the slot and then the boundary areas are covered, I want to see DJ Barksdale, Elijah Culp, Justin Eaglin, all of our safeties, the Tyler Browns, the Curtis Harris Lopez, the Jacob Thomases. This is their game to shine, because once they decide to spill the ball outside, no one is out there but them. And they're on an island, because we can't put Trent Hendrick out there or any of the linebackers, because that leaves the middle exposed. And if you watch any of the ODU games, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, they line up their receivers to the sideline. So there's 30 to 40 yards between the tackles and the receivers. That's just space. And if we don't tackle well in space and beat our guys one-on-one, it's going to be a long day. And watch the Virginia Tech game. It's not like they had better players or faster players or bigger players. Virginia Tech just didn't know how to defend in space, and they attacked it over and over and over again, and they were able to run the ball, right? And I think once you start that, it's almost like a version of the triple option out of the shotgun, where you run the ball, you can run the quarterback outside, you throw the quick bubble, you throw the quick slant. They do a lot of screen game with the receivers. I think their short receiver, the 5'8" guy from Richmond, I forgot his name. I think he graduated already, but they've got a lot of those types of players. They got those twitchy, Mickey Matthews used to call them satellite players, that they're just very good in space. They make people miss. And when you think about the units that need to be successful, it's our defensive backfield. And obviously up front, like if we can control them and stonewall that offensive line, which historically has been really bad. I think ever since we've been to FBS, the offensive lines at ODU leave a lot to be demanded. But like this year, I think they're one of the best and most productive offensive lines. And that starts with Colton Joseph making the right decisions. I encourage anyone, if any fan or students watching this, look up Dan Casey in Twitter. He does a great breakdown on the different quarterback options that ODU likes to do. One of them being the backside option, which I've never seen before, where typically you're attacking the front side, but they're doing a dive and the quarterback leaks on the backside, which we typically don't see in the option game. They do some very crazy things. Shout out to their offensive coordinator. He was doing this at Fordham, and he made Fordham, which is a small private school in the Bronx, very productive in the league. I forgot if they're Patriot League or not at the FCS level. They bring them in to ODU to really help with some of their talent deficiencies. And I think Colton Joseph has a very strong command on this offense. But if we can get the Sahir West, the Gobiras, and all those guys to hit him early, I think we've got a solid chance to dominate the run game. Because to your point, John, I think we've had at least 34 to 35 minutes in terms of time of possession the last few games that we've really dominated, but we have to finish on offense.
I mean, what do we have? 81 plays yesterday, I think it was. I think Chandler told me that it was crazy how that time possession is such a massive factor. I did want to ask you, what do you see from our offense against their defense? Because you mentioned they do run a 3-3-5 stack, and that's not something we typically see. Why does that pose problems, and how do you see the makeup of this current offense faring against that type of defensive scheme?
You look back to when we used to play Villanova in the FCS, and they would have 3-3-5, which means there's 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and you've got 5 DBs, 2 of them being more like pseudo linebackers. So you've got a lot of guys in line of scrimmage. So you've got up to 7 to 8 guys up front that sometimes you don't know who do you have to block. Some people could be coming in on rushes. Some people could be dropping back in coverage. And if the center and the tackles are not on the same page, it's very easy to have, a free rusher to the quarterback or a misfit in the run game. So it's a very confusing game of cat and mouse. Not a lot of people run it. I think Marshall runs it under Tony Gibson now because when he came from NC State, but this is similar to when we had to prepare for Air Force and we had to figure out, okay, this is an offense and a defense we do not see often. And will our offense or defensive scout teams run it at the same level of efficiency and productivity as the opposition? Probably not. So that's what really the unfamiliarity of it is probably what makes it the most difficult. And this team's been running it, I think, ever since Ricky Ronnie's been there. So they're 4 or 5 years in the system. They're going to blitz everyone. You're going to see safeties come down. You're going to see linebackers play on the deep halves. You're going to see everyone rush right away. It's going to be very important for Barnett to make the right decision. But more importantly, the offensive staff's got to make the game easy for Barnett. And if that means first read and go, give them 1 pass play before you hand the ball off, let's dominate the line of scrimmage, right? Let's do more diamond formation on 3rd and 1s or whatever. Like, let's make it very simple for the offense to execute, because in this defense, if we're in 3rd and 12 and we've got to throw against 8 or 9 people in coverage, that's a bad day overall.
Awesome. Well, lots to look forward to. I know there's going to be a lot of coverage this week. I know this will be a subject of the press conferences that the media has, as well as all the other shows around the JMU universe. This is a monster matchup. Listen to Matt Rohn. Listen to the challenges I'm sure is going to come from this coaching staff and the players. We have an ability to impact this game as fans, be in the seats, pack this, and stay the whole game. And let's get to 6-1, and let's get those graphics all over ESPN and everything else showing JMU with a path to the college football playoff. Again, we don't know if that's going to happen. So much football left ahead. Marshall looks like they could be a sleeper. App State looks like they're figuring it out now in Sun Belt play. So there'll be no easy games down the stretch. But again, just win the game that's in front of you, and that's ODU this week. Let's keep the trophy, the Royal Rivalry in Harrisonburg. I did want to get to final thoughts, guys. Is there anything you wanted to mention about what happened to the rest of the Sun Belt? We did see Texas State lose again. That game on a Tuesday night was looming as this massive showdown as well. A little bit of air out of their bubbles now. They're 0-2 in Sun Belt play. I'll throw it out to anybody who wants to take it. Just anything you're keeping your eye on in Sun Belt play or anything else in the group of 5.
Yeah, I agree. I do think the Sun Belt is down from where it has been the last couple of years, but I think there's a lot of it seems like everyone's kind of beating up on everyone else. And we even got guilty of saying it a few weeks ago that it was clearly JMU, Old Dominion, Texas State, and everybody else. Well, Texas State's 0-2 in conference. Old Dominion just lost to what most people have thought the last few weeks was one of the worst teams in the Sun Belt. So at this point, the jury's out. And I do think this game this weekend gives us the clearest path to winning the East. Having said that, I think there are still paths available regardless of the way the game goes this week, just because of how I've seen the rest of conference play out. You mentioned App State. I was impressed by their win yesterday, but was also impressed by Washington State leading Ole Miss for most of the game, and excited about that because that is probably the largest name on terms of a branding to ever come into Bridgeforth Stadium. And so it would be great for them to continue to be a team that's well respected nationally and get them to come in. Obviously, that's that Marvel promotion day. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to bring some national eyeballs to that game. But, we can do better as a JMU program. We should expect better. But let's also sit back and take a moment to enjoy the fact that we're 5-1. We all think back to our favorite seasons and how they play out. We've had years where they've started off really well last year and then didn't end really well. We're in a position right now where, other than 6-0, you couldn't be any better. So I'm really excited for what this season has already given to me, my friends, my family, our tailgates, the memories we've had. I mean, it's just been fun to watch this team for this year. And I do think it's a team that's continuing to evolve. And again, this is my final thought. Go back and watch Coach Chesney and the players in the post-game pressers from yesterday. If you have any questions on how you feel this team is approaching the rest of the season going forward, I think their words and how they communicate it is all you need to know to really feel confident, not only going into this week against Old Dominion, but for the rest of the season.
You're here. Michael.
I'll leave it at this. So I want to respond a little bit. John, you mentioned earlier about some of the negativity on the fan base, on social media, which we get it, right? We've all been a part of it. I've probably fed into it in years past. We've called for quarterbacks. We've called for coordinators. We've called for head coaches' heads to be, held accountable. But at some point, and fan base, listen to me, at some point, we have to rally around this team. Because at the end of the day, not only are they 5-1, we've done everything in the first 6 games to find ways to lose. And let's call it what it is. The penalties, the missed throws, the drop passes, the fumbles, the quarterback switches back and forth, the missed fourth downs, you name it. We have done everything we can possibly do to lose football games, yet this team finds a way. And there's value in that, and there's merit in that. And at some point, as a fan base, the Barstool accounts, the sports news accounts, everyone, the game day account, we have to rally around this program and this team because they're 5-1. We're 3-0 in the Sun Belt. We've never won the Sun Belt before. And this team, for whatever reason, finds a way to win, whether it's a defensive stop, a special teams play. Patrick Rea had another great game. Let's talk about the special teams. This team finds a way. And we compared a lot to last year. Obviously, we got 54 new players, you name it. But they stick together. They find the winning plays to make it count. Whether they screwed up in the first quarter, second, whatever, we find a way to score more points than the opposition. And at some point, as a fan base, online, in person, let's rally around Coach Chesney and keep the momentum going. And quite frankly, if you don't want to do that, put money where your mouth is. This used to be a facilities, arms race. This is now a talent acquisition arms race. Put money where your mouth is. Donate to the program. Donate to the Duke Club. Everything is about revenue share right now. And I'd like to say that JMU is on top of the Sun Belt, but there's more to be done. Donate to athletics. If you want better play, if you want better players, if you want better coaches, there is no other time in the history of JMU athletics or college sports that you can literally affect and influence that outcome on the field. So get behind the fan base, get behind the program, get behind Chesney, get behind quarterback one, and let's root for this team hard on Saturday.
Man. Perfectly said. Mic drop. I don't have anything else to say. That was great, Michael. I guess I will end with one thing just to say, again, we try to say it as much as possible to show like this. Yesterday was pretty cool because I didn't think more than our last home game we could have more people come up and say they were fans of what we do. Yesterday was just pretty wild because we had such a variety of people say they appreciate the conversation, appreciate the discussion. Just know that it's never felt on deaf ears. Thank you. You're why we do this, and we're going to find every opportunity to continue to show gratitude for it because it matters. Shout out to, again, all of our sponsors, Skyline Financial Partners, Champions Drive Bourbon, Where's Woody, Shoker Enterprises, Purple Nation, the Dead Meat Society, Outdoor Kitchen Creations, and Valley Road Vineyards. Big week on tap. Digest all the content. Get excited. Buy your Champions Drive. Get in the tailgate lots when they open at 8. Let's make Saturday a special day in Harrisonburg. And once again, on national TV, show the country what makes JMU so special. Let's find a way to get to 6-1. Win by 1. That's all that matters, and move on. There are 2 halves of football for a reason. Let's stick with this team, as Michael said. And with that will wrap up another episode of JMU Sound Off. We'll see you next week at 8 p.m. as we recap everything that happened against ODU. Talk to you guys soon. Go Dukes.